The rain smelled wrong. Chenwei stood at the edge of the train platform, the downpour soaking through his thin cotton shirt, and breathed in the acrid scent of diesel mixed with something else. Wet concrete, exhaust fumes, and beneath it all, the metallic tang of the rails themselves. Wrong, because rain should smell like earth and petrichor, like the lotus pond behind his grandmother's house, not like this industrial cocktail of Beijing's Central Station in the summer of 1976. His fingers were white where they gripped the handle of his cloth bag. Inside, 3 pairs of socks, 2 shirts, a bar of soap wrapped in brown paper, and a book he wasn't supposed to have. The bag pulled at his shoulder, but he didn't shift it. Couldn't, because if he moved, if he acknowledged the weight, he'd have to acknowledge everything else. The crowd of families saying goodbye, the mothers weeping openly, the fathers standing rigid with hands clasped behind their backs, the younger siblings who didn't understand why their brothers and sisters were leaving. Wei Gay, you have to write! A girl's voice cut through the drum of rain on the platform's tin awning. He turned. She was running toward him. Her leather shoes. Impractical. Expensive. The kind secretaries wore. Splashing through puddles. Her hair, carefully curled that morning, was plastered to her face. Young Mei, 22 years old, with the kind of delicate features that made men write poetry and the kind of ambition that made her terrifying. She collided with him, and he caught her automatically. Her perfume, jasmine, always jasmine, filled his nose, overpowering the diesel. "I will," he said. "Every week. Promise me." Her fingers dug into his wet shirt. "And when I get the transfer approved, when I can bring you back, May. He gently unwound her hands. "You focus on your career. The position at the ministry is nothing without you." Her eyes were bright with tears or rain. He couldn't tell which. 2 years. That's what Uncle Zheng said. 2 years, and he can arrange a transfer. Just wait for me. The train whistle screamed. Steam hissed from beneath the carriages, adding moisture to the already saturated air. "You should go," he said. "Your shoes? Damn my shoes." But she was already stepping back, her heel catching on the platform edge. He steadied her again. "Chenwei, promise me. 2 years." He nodded. What else could he do? She was offering him everything. A future in Beijing, connections through her uncle who sat on the Revolutionary Committee, a way out of the exile that awaited him on the countryside posting. All he had to do was wait while she climbed, while she secured her position at the Ministry of Agriculture, while she became indispensable enough that bringing back a country administrator wouldn't raise eyebrows. 2 years of his life for her career. It seemed fair. It seemed like love. She kissed him then, fierce and quick, her lips cold from the rain. Then she was running back toward the station entrance, her ruined shoes clicking in a regular rhythm on the wet concrete. Chenwei climbed onto the train, found his assigned seat in the hard sleeper car, 3rd class, crowded, smelling of too many bodies in too small a space. He wedged himself into the corner by the window and watched Beijing's outskirts blur into rice paddies, then into hills, then into the kind of countryside that existed in propaganda posters, but never quite seemed real. The woman across from him was knitting. The click, click, click of her needles matched the rhythm of the rails. Click, 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 click. Hypnotic, endless. Chenwei closed his eyes. Somewhere between waking and sleeping, the sound changed. The click, click, click became the tick, tick, tick of an IV drip. The humid press of bodies became the antiseptic chill of a hospital room. The jasmine became disinfectant. Chenwei's eyes snapped open. The train? He was on the train. The woman was still knitting. Outside, darkness had fallen, and his reflection stared back at him from the window. 24 years old. Way thin from a winter of insufficient rations, hair too long because barbers cost money, and Yang Mei liked it when he looked artistic. But for a moment, just a fraction of a second, he'd seen someone else. An old man, gray-haired, liver-spotted hands, the kind of deep exhaustion that came from carrying disappointment for decades. The IV drip continued in his memory. Tick, tick, tick. He pressed his palm against the window. The glass was cold and solid. Real. The train was real. 1976 was real. But so was the hospital room. So were the 53 years that stretched between this moment and the moment he died. Would die, had already died. In a provincial hospital bed, alone except for a nurse who didn't know his name, his body finally giving up after a lifetime of watching other people's ambitions eclipse his own. "You all right? Comrade?" The knitting woman had stopped clicking. She was looking at him with concern. "You're very pale." "I'm fine." His voice sounded strange. Too young. This body was 24, but his mind was… what? 77? Both? Neither. The memories were settling now, slotting into place like tiles in a mosaic. He remembered this train ride, remembered arriving in Chingshan County 3 days later, sick from bad water and worse food. Remembered the party secretary's disappointed face when he saw how thin and scholarly Chenwei looked, how clearly unsuited for agricultural work. He remembered the letters, one every week for the first 3 months. As promised, young Mei writing about her new position, her new apartment, small but in a good building, her new colleagues, challenging, but she was managing, the letters growing shorter, or once every 2 weeks, once a month. He remembered the letter that came at the end of the first year. Uncle Zhang had died. Heart attack. Very sudden. "But don't worry," she'd written. "I'm still working on the transfer." He remembered waiting through the second year, and the third, and the fourth. He remembered the telegram finally in 1981, 5 years after this train ride. Young Mei was getting married to a vice minister's son. She was very sorry. She hoped he understood. She hoped he'd found happiness in his work. He'd burned the telegram in the stove that heated his tiny concrete room and never written back. But that was the old timeline, the discarded one, the life he'd already lived. Chenwei looked down at his hands, young, unmarked by age spots or arthritis. He flexed his fingers, felt the strength in them. This body was 24. This moment was real, and somehow impossibly he had been given it again. The question was, what would he do with it? The train rocked. The woman resumed knitting. Click, click, click. Outside, the darkness was absolute, the kind of rural dark that swallowed sound and light and hope. In his previous life, Chenwei had spent 2 years waiting for Yang Mei's miracle transfer, then another 3 years trying to arrange his own return through official channels, then another decade convincing himself that rural work was noble and important, then 2 more decades simply existing, doing competent but unremarkable work, rising slowly through bureaucratic ranks until he reached the modest position of deputy county administrator, a job he'd held for 15 years until retirement. He'd died never having returned to Beijing, never having married, never having built anything that would outlast him, but he remembered something else now, something he'd forgotten in all the waiting, all the hoping that Yang Mei would save him. He remembered being good at this. In those first few years, before the disappointment had calcified into bitterness, he'd actually been good at rural administration, good at talking to farmers, at understanding the practical problems that theoretical solutions never addressed, good at navigating the complex social hierarchies of village life, good at the work itself when he'd stopped seeing it as temporary exile and started seeing it as work. He'd been good at it, and he'd thrown it all away waiting for someone else to rescue him. The realization hit him like cold water. Yang Mei wasn't going to rescue him. Not because she was cruel, she wasn't. Not because she didn't care, she probably did in her way, but because her ambition would always matter more than his comfort, and in the calculus of her life, he was a pleasant addition, but never a necessity. He'd known this somehow, even the first time. Known it in the way she talked about her career, her opportunities. Known it in the way she'd show up 2 hours late for their dates because a superior had needed something. Known it in the way she'd introduce him to her colleagues as my friend Chenwei rather than my boyfriend. He'd known it and ignored it because she was beautiful and connected, and being loved by her had felt like an achievement. But love that felt like an achievement wasn't love. It was just another ambition. Chenwei reached into his bag and pulled out the book. Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The Yang Mei had given it to him the week before, a parting gift. He ran his fingers over the cover, cloth binding, nice edition, probably expensive. Then he noticed the inscription. To Wei Ge, who will wait for me. Always, Yang Mei. Always. Not, I'll wait for you too. Not, we'll wait for each other. You will wait for me. A command dressed as affection. He closed the book, put it back in the bag, and in that moment, in the darkness of a train car rattling through nowhere, Chenwei made a decision that would reshape the trajectory of his second life. He wouldn't wait. He would go to Chingshan County. He would do the work. He would be exceptional at it. And when Youngmei's letters came asking him to hold on just a little longer, just until her next promotion, just until she'd secured her position, he would write back politely and tell her, no. No, he would not wait. No, he would not make himself smaller so she could grow larger. No, he would not spend another lifetime as someone's backup plan. The train rocked. The woman knitted. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to soften the darkness. Chenwei pressed his forehead against the window and smiled, a small private expression that the old version of himself, the one who had died disappointed and alone, would never have recognized. He was 24 years old. He had nothing but a cloth bag and a job assignment to the middle of nowhere, and for the first time in either lifetime, he was free. The smell hit him before the sight did. Rich, dark earth, not the processed, urban smell of potted plants or park gardens, but real agricultural soil, loamy and complex, carrying notes of manure, compost. The green, sharp scent of growing things, and beneath it all, the mineral tang of clay. Chenwei stepped off the bus into Chingshan County's main square and breathed it in deeply. Around him, the square was organized chaos. The bus station, really just a covered platform with benches, sat at one end. The other three sides held a general store, a government office building whose paint was peeling in long, sad strips, and a restaurant with red characters announcing Chingshan People's Restaurant, above a door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. You, the new administrator? A man's voice, rough from cigarettes. Chenwei turned. The speaker was perhaps 50, sun-darkened skin, wearing the standard blue cadre uniform, but with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Not a desk worker, then. Someone who still did physical labor. Chenwei, reporting from Beijing. Secretary Wu? The man didn't offer to shake hands, just looked Chenwei up and down with the assessing gaze of someone buying livestock. You look like you'd blow away in a strong wind. In his previous life, Chenwei had bristled at this, had drawn himself up and recited his credentials, degree from People's University, 2 years at the Municipal Planning Office, fluent in Russian. Now he just smiled. Good thing there's no wind today, then. Secretary W's expression shifted, something that might have been approval flickering across his weathered face. Come on, I'll show you where you're staying. Then we eat. Then we figure out if you're actually useful or just another Beijing boy playing at countryside work. The secretary's office was a 10-minute walk from the square, down a dirt road that turned to mud wherever water collected in the ruts. Chenwei's shoes, the nice leather ones Youngmei had insisted he buy, so you look professional, were caked with red clay within 5 minutes. Chingshan County covers approximately 460 square kilometers. Secretary Wu said as they walked, not slowing his pace or looking back to see if Chenwei was keeping up. 17 villages, 8,000 residents give or take. Primary income sources are rice, tea, and timber. We're behind on our quota for all three. Chenwei filed the information away. In his previous life, he'd been given this same briefing and had responded with a litany of questions about infrastructure, resource allocation, administrative procedures, all the things he'd learned in university, all the things that had made Secretary W's eyes glaze over with boredom. What's the main obstacle? He asked instead. Wu stopped walking, turned to look at him. What? To meeting quota. Is it labor shortage, weather, transport, equipment? A pause, then. All of the above. Plus the fact that half the village leaders are idiots appointed because they had the right family background, not because they know anything about farming. Can they be replaced? Not without causing political headaches I don't need. Can they be worked around? Secretary Wu studied him for a long moment, then resumed walking, but slower now. His posture slightly less dismissive. Maybe, if you're smart about it. They passed fields where workers were transplanting rice seedlings, their backs bent in the eternal posture of agricultural labor. The wet paddies reflected the morning sun in countless small mirrors. A group of women singing a work song, their voices carrying across the water. Chenwei had hated this sight the first time, had seen it as evidence of his exile, of how far he'd fallen from the intellectual life he'd imagined for himself. Now he saw it differently, saw the precision required to space the seedlings correctly, saw the strength needed to maintain that bent position for hours, saw the coordination of the work song, keeping everyone at the same rhythm, saw competence. Here, Secretary Wu stopped in front of a small concrete building. Single story, 2 windows, a door painted institutional green. Your quarters, shared with Comrade Lin, the health administrator. He's out at 4th Village doing vaccinations. Should be back tomorrow. Inside, the room was sparse. 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 chairs, a small stove in the corner, bare walls except for a mandatory portrait of Chairman Mao. The floor was swept clean, at least. Chen Wei set down his bag. Where's the office? Eager to start? A hint of mockery in WU's voice. Eager to understand what I'm supposed to be doing. Tomorrow. Today you rest, settle in. Tonight we have a welcoming dinner. The county leadership wants to meet you. The county leadership. In his previous life, this dinner had been excruciating. Chen Wei had shown up trying to impress them with his education, his Beijing credentials, but his theoretical knowledge of agricultural policy. He'd drunk too much trying to keep up with their toasts, said too much trying to prove his worth, and woken up the next morning with a headache and the certain knowledge that everyone thought he was an arrogant fool. What time? He asked. 6 o'clock. At the restaurant. Don't be late. Secretary Wu moved toward the door, then paused. And Chen Wei, whatever you think you know about countryside work from your university studies, forget it. Here, the soil teaches the lessons. You just have to be smart enough to learn. The door closed. Chen Wei was alone. He sat on the bed, wooden frame, thin mattress, but clean sheets. The springs creaked. Through the window, he could see more fields, more workers, the mountains rising in the distance like waves frozen mid-crash. 53 years. He'd spent 53 years in this county, and he'd never really seen it. Had been too busy looking toward Beijing, toward the life he thought he was supposed to have. But now he could see the possibility. Not of escape. Of building. He pulled out Yang Mei's book. Opened to the inscription again. To Wei Ge, who will wait for me. Chen Wei found the small stove in the corner. It was cold, but there was coal in a bucket and matches on the desk. He lit the fire, waited for it to catch, then carefully tore out the page with the inscription. The paper curled and blackened. The characters disappeared. The smoke smelled bitter. He fed the rest of the book to the flames, page by page, watching the strategies of ancient kingdoms turn to ash. When it was done, he washed his face in the basin, changed into his other shirt, and walked out to explore the county that would become his life's work. The restaurant smelled of garlic, ginger, and cooking wine. Chen Wei arrived at 5:45. Early enough to be respectful, but not so early as to seem desperate. The main room held 6 round tables, only one of which was set for dinner. 10 place settings, each with a small cup for baijiu and a larger cup for tea. He recognized this setup. The previous timeline's version had intimidated him. So many officials, so many opportunities to make mistakes. Now he saw it for what it was. Theater. Each person at this table would be performing a role, and the trick was to figure out what role he was expected to play. Comrade Chen? A booming voice. A man entered from the kitchen, round-faced and jovial, wearing an apron over his cadre blues. You're early! Good. He shows respect. I'm Deputy Secretary Zhao. I handle economic planning, which means I'm responsible for the fact that we're behind on quota. He laughed at his own joke. Chen Wei smiled politely. Come, sit. Have some tea. Zhao poured from a thermos, the tea pale green and fragrant. Long Jing, from our own county. Not as good as Westlake, of course, but respectable. Chen Wei accepted the cup. The tea was actually quite good, fresh, with that distinctive chestnut sweetness. It's excellent. You're being polite, but I appreciate it. Zhao settled into the chair beside him. So, Beijing boy, what brings you to our humble corner of the world? Fall from grace, political trouble, or did you volunteer out of revolutionary enthusiasm? In his previous life, Chen Wei had stammered through some nonsense about serving the people. Now, free, he met Zhao's eyes and said simply, Assignment. I drew Chingshan County, could have been worse. Zhao blinked, then laughed. A real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. Could have been worse. I like that. Honest. Most Beijing boys spend their first month explaining how this is just temporary, how they'll be back to the capital any day now. I'm sure some will, Chen Wei said, but probably not me. No. Zhao leaned forward, interested now. Why not? Because I'm not connected enough to pull the strings for a transfer, and I'm not talented enough to be recalled for my indispensable skills, which means I'm here for the duration. He sipped his tea. So I might as well get good at it. A moment of silence. Then Zhao slapped the table, making the cups jump. Secretary Wu. You were right about this one. Chen Wei turned to see Wu entering, along with several other men. The party secretary's expression was carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Assessment, recalculation. The others filed in. Introductions were made. Deputy Secretary Zhao, Economic Planning. Director Feng, Agricultural Bureau. Director Liu, Civil Affairs. Chief Engineer Huang, Water Conservancy. Dr. Lin, Health and Chen Wei's roommate. Director Ma, Education. And finally, a younger man, perhaps 30, with the alert eyes of someone who missed nothing. Comrade Liang, Secretary Wu said, our propaganda director. Liang shook Chen Wei's hand with a grip just slightly too firm. Welcome to Chingshan. I hope you'll find it educational. The word carried weight. In the political climate of 1976, educational could mean many things, none of them comfortable. They sat. The waitress, a girl of perhaps 16, moving with the efficient grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, brought dishes. Cold cucumber and garlic sauce, mala chicken, braised pork belly that glistened with rendered fat, stir-fried greens still sizzling in their wok, steamed fish whole with ginger and scallions. Secretary Wu raised his glass. To Comrade Chen Wei, may his work benefit the people of Chingshan County. To Comrade Chen Wei, the chorus of voices, the burn of Baiju down his throat. Then the questions began how. Tell us, Comrade Chen, Director Feng said. What do you know about rice cultivation? In his previous life, Chen Wei had launched into a description of hybrid varieties and yield optimization theories he'd read about. It had been a disaster, too abstract, too disconnected from the reality of Chingshan's specific conditions. Now he said, not much. I've read the theoretical literature, but I've never grown rice myself. I was hoping you could teach me. Feng's eyebrows rose. Teach you? I can't administrate effectively if I don't understand the work, so yes, I'd like to learn. Spend some time in the fields, understand the full cycle, if you're willing to show me. Another silence. Glances exchanged around the table. Dr. Lin spoke up. That's unusual. Most administrators prefer to stay in the office. Most administrators probably make better decisions than I will then, Chen Wei said. I need every advantage I can get. Laughter this time. Genuine, surprised. The tension in the room shifted, softening. What about education? Director Ma asked. Our school situation is complicated. Multiple villages, limited teachers, students at different levels, all in the same classroom. What would you do about it? Chen Wei set down his chopsticks. This was a test, he knew. Ma was likely skeptical of Beijing intellectuals swooping in with grand plans that ignored local realities. I don't know yet, he said. I'd need to visit the schools first, see how they're actually operating. Talk to the teachers about what's working and what isn't. Understand the constraints, budget, personnel, facilities. Then maybe I'd have useful thoughts. Right now, I'd just be guessing. Ma nodded slowly. And if Secretary Wu ordered you to implement a new curriculum next month, ordered you to solve the education problem immediately, all eyes turned to Wu, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Chen Wei met Ma's gaze. Then I'd ask for his advice on how to implement it effectively. And I'd probably make mistakes, because that's what happens when you rush complex decisions. But I'd learn from those mistakes and try not to repeat them. A wise answer, Ma said, for someone so young. The dinner continued. More dishes, more baiju, the conversation ranging from politics, everyone carefully orthodox, to weather, everyone pessimistic about the autumn harvest, to gossip. Who was sleeping with whom? Who was embezzling what? Who was angling for which promotion? Chen Wei listened more than he spoke, noted the dynamics, how Feng and Huang seemed to be rivals, how Liang watched everyone with those sharp eyes, how Zhao played the role of jovial mediator, how Wu remained largely silent, letting his deputies do the talking. He drank sparingly, ate moderately, laughed at jokes, asked questions that showed interest without suggesting he already knew the answers, and gradually, imperceptibly, he felt the room's attitude toward him shift. You're not what I expected, Chief Engineer Huang said around 10 o'clock, after the fish had been reduced to bones and the pork belly to a memory. Secretary Wu said you were educated. I thought that meant useless. I am educated, Chen Wei said. Whether I'm useless remains to be seen. Fair. Huang refilled Chen Wei's teacup. Tell me, educated man from Beijing, you know anything about reservoir construction? Only what I learned in my hydraulic engineering course, which is theoretical and probably outdated. Good. Because I need someone who can read technical documents and translate them into language the village leaders will understand. Think you can do that? I can try. Trying is all anyone can do. Huang raised his baiju to trying. They drank. By 11, the dinner was winding down, the dishes cleared, the baiju bottles empty. Director Ma and Dr. Lin had already left. Feng was arguing with Zhao about next year's quota targets, their voices loud with alcohol but not quite angry. Secretary Wu stood. The room quieted. Comrade Chen Wei, he said formally, tomorrow you begin work. Comrade Liang will show you the office and explain your duties. You will work hard, you will learn fast. You will not embarrass Chingshan County or yourself. Understood? Understood, Secretary, Wu nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. And Chen Wei? That thing you said about not being connected enough for a transfer? I checked your file. You're not exactly unconnected. Young Mei, nice girl. Her uncle was on the Municipal Revolutionary Committee before he died. That's influence. The room was very quiet now. Was influence, Chen Wei said carefully. Uncle Zhang passed away, and Young Mei is focused on her own career. I'm not expecting any favors. But she's expecting you to wait for her. That's what I heard. Chen Wei met W's eyes. In his previous life, he would have blustered, defended Young Mei, insisted that love was different from using connections. Now he said simply, she can expect whatever she wants. I'm here to do a job. Wu studied him, then nodded once, a gesture that might have been respect. Good. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early. The walk back to his quarters was dark and quiet. The dirt road under his feet, the stars overhead, more than he'd ever seen in Beijing, dense and brilliant and indifferent. Chen Wei's head was clear despite the baiju. His body was tired, but his mind alert. He was running the evening through his memory, analyzing what he'd learned. Secretary Wu was a pragmatist, respected competence, despised pretension. Deputy Secretary Zhao was smart and political, playing the fool but missing nothing. Director Feng was insecure about his agricultural knowledge, which made him defensive. Chief Engineer Huang was desperate for someone who could bridge the gap between technical expertise and practical implementation. Director Ma cared deeply about education, but was tired of empty promises. Dr. Lin was quiet but observant, the kind of person who would be a useful ally or a dangerous enemy. And Liang, Propaganda Director Liang, was the wild card. Smart, ambitious, watching everyone for signs of political deviation. Chen Wei would need to be very, very careful around Liang. He reached his quarters, lit the lamp. The room was still empty. Lin must be staying overnight in 4th Village. Chen Wei sat at the desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. He should write to Young Mei, tell her he'd arrived safely, describe the dinner, reaffirm his commitment to waiting. That's what the old Chen Wei would have done. Instead, he wrote 3 lines. Arrived in Chingshan County safely. Beginning work tomorrow. I hope Beijing is treating you well. No endearments, no promises, no plans. He folded the letter, addressed it, set it aside to mail tomorrow. Then he pulled out a fresh sheet and began to write something different. A list. Observations from the dinner, questions to investigate, people to cultivate, problems to understand before proposing solutions. He wrote until the lamp oil ran low and his hand cramped. He wrote until he'd purged the last vestiges of the old timeline from his mind. He wrote until he was no longer Chen Wei who was waiting for rescue. He was just Chen Wei. And the work was beginning. The rice paddies in May smelled like life itself. Chen Wei stood knee-deep in muddy water, his pants rolled to his thighs, feet planted in the soft bottom that tried to suck his legs down with each step. Ahead of him, a row of farmers, mostly women, moved in synchronized rhythm, bending to plant seedlings in the flooded earth. Behind him, more workers prepared the next section, hoeing the soil into the precise consistency needed for transplanting. Not like that. A woman's voice, sharp with exasperation. She was perhaps 40, skin dark from sun, wearing the same faded blue work clothes as everyone else. You're spacing them too far apart. Like this, she demonstrated, hands quick and sure, setting the seedling at exactly the right depth, exactly the right distance from its neighbors. Chen Wei adjusted his technique. Planted the next one. Better. She moved on, correcting someone else. This was his 4th week in the fields. Every morning, he split his time. 3 hours in the office handling paperwork, 3 hours doing whatever labor was most urgent, 2 hours visiting different villages to understand their specific situations. Then back to the office for evening meetings and administrative work until he couldn't keep his eyes open. It was exhausting. It was educational. It was nothing like his previous life. In the old timeline, he'd spent his first 3 months in the office, reading reports, filling out forms, attending meetings where nothing was decided. He'd been competent but disconnected, a functionary processing information about a world he didn't understand. Now he understood that the reports lied. Not intentionally, no one was trying to deceive, but they simplified and smoothed and categorized in ways that stripped out the essential messiness of agricultural reality. The report would say, rice cultivation on schedule. It wouldn't say that Third Village's fields flooded too early because the irrigation channel had a crack, or that Fifth Village was short 10 workers because of a flu outbreak, or that Sixth Village's party secretary had ordered the transplanting done at the wrong phase of the moon and the village elders were furious. You only learn that by being in the mud. "Comrade Chen!" A shout from the road. Chenwei looked up to see a bicycle, rare in these parts, with Director Feng pedaling furiously. "Secretary Wu needs you! County office immediately!" Chenwei waded out of the paddy, grabbed the towel someone handed him, wiped the worst of the mud from his legs. His feet, when he tried to put on his shoes, were wrinkled and pale like drowned things. "What's happened?" he asked Feng. "Inspection team from the Prefecture. Arrived an hour ago, unannounced." Feng was sweating, not from the bicycle ride, but from anxiety. "They want to review our quota progress. Secretary Wu wants all administrators present." Chenwei's stomach tightened. Unannounced inspections were never good. They usually meant someone at the prefecture level had heard rumors of problems and was coming to find evidence to support a purge. "I need 5 minutes to change. No time, come as you are." So Chenwei climbed onto the back of Feng's bicycle, muddy legs and all, and they careened down the dirt road toward the county office. The ride was 15 minutes of chaos, Feng pedaling too fast, the bicycle wobbling on the uneven ground, Chenwei gripping the seat to keep from flying off. They arrived at the office building just as Secretary Wu was leading 3 men in crisp uniforms out of his office. The lead inspector was perhaps 55, with the kind of rigid posture that suggested military background. His eyes swept the courtyard and landed on Chenwei with the precision of a hawk spotting prey. "This is Comrade Chenwei," Secretary Wu said, his voice carefully neutral. "Our administrator from Beijing. He was in the fields when you arrived." The inspector looked Chenwei up and down, took in the mud-caked pants, the rolled sleeves, the farmer's tan already forming on his forearms. "From Beijing," the inspector said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Comrade Inspector." "And you're in the fields because—" Here was the test. Chenwei could play it humble, just doing my small part to serve the people. Or he could play it practical, learning the work so I can administrate effectively. Or he could play it revolutionary, following Chairman Mao's directive to learn from the masses. In his previous life, he would have stumbled through some combination of all three, trying to please everyone. Now he said simply, "Because I can't understand the reports if I don't understand the work they're describing." The inspector's expression didn't change. "Show me your reports." They moved to Chenwei's office, a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets stuffed with documents. Chenwei pulled out the folders. Rice cultivation, tea harvest, timber quotas, infrastructure maintenance, education statistics, health records. The inspector read in silence, occasionally made a note. His 2 subordinates stood behind him, identically expressionless. Secretary Wu and Deputy Secretary Zhao waited by the door. Feng had disappeared, probably to warn the other directors. The air in the room was thick with tension. Finally, the inspector looked up. "These reports are remarkably detailed," he said. "More detailed than most counties provide. This section here about irrigation challenges in Third Village. Most administrators wouldn't include that level of specificity." "I thought it was relevant to understanding why our rice quota might be affected," Chenwei said. "It is, but it also reveals a problem that could be interpreted as poor management." "Yes, Comrade Inspector?" "It could be," Chenwei met his eyes. "But hiding the problem doesn't fix the irrigation channel." A long pause, then, "No, it doesn't." The inspector set down the reports. "Walk with me, Comrade Chen. Show me this irrigation channel in Third Village." So they walked, Chenwei, still muddy, the inspector and his subordinates, pristine in their uniforms, Secretary Wu and Zhao trailing behind. The half-hour walk to Third Village was silent, except for the crunch of gravel under their feet and the distant sound of work songs from the fields. Third Village's irrigation channel was exactly as Chinwei had described, an earth-cut waterway approximately 2 meters wide, running from the reservoir down to the rice paddies. And halfway down its length, a crack where tree roots had broken through the wall, causing water to leak into the surrounding soil. "How long has it been like this?" the inspector asked. "We discovered it 2 weeks ago," Chenwei said, "during the spring inspection cycle. And your plan for repair?" "We're waiting until after transplanting season. The channel needs to be drained for proper repair, which would affect 7 villages' irrigation schedule. So we're managing the leak with temporary measures until we can afford the disruption." Temporary measures. Chenwei led them to where a work crew had built a small dam of sandbags on the upstream side of the crack, redirecting the main flow. Reduces the pressure on the damaged section. We're losing about 15% of water flow, but it's better than losing the entire channel mid-season. The inspector walked around the dam, examined the construction, tested the stability of the sandbags. "Who designed this?" "Chief Engineer Huang designed it. The Third Village work crew built it." "And who decided to delay the permanent repair?" "I did," Chenwei said. "Secretary Wu approved the decision." The inspector turned to Wu. "Oh, you let a new administrator make infrastructure decisions?" "I let a competent administrator make infrastructure decisions," Wu said evenly, "after consulting with our chief engineer and the affected villages." Another long silence. The inspector's subordinates were writing in their notebooks. Chenwei couldn't tell if that was good or bad. "Show me the tea cultivation," the inspector said finally. They walked to the tea terraces, showed the spring picking operation, discussed the processing facilities, the quality control measures, the market situation. The inspector asked detailed questions. Chenwei answered honestly, including the challenges, labor shortages, aging tea plants that needed replacement, competition from other counties. Then to the timber operation, to the school in Fifth Village, to the health clinic where Dr. Lin was conducting his vaccination program. Everywhere they went, Chenwei showed the reality. Not the sanitized version that looked good on paper, but the actual work. Complicated, messy, full of trade-offs and compromises and practical solutions to intractable problems. It was nearly dark when they returned to the county office. The inspector and his team went into Secretary W's office for a private discussion. Chenwei was dismissed. He walked back to his quarters in the twilight. His body ached from the day's labor. His mind was exhausted from the constant vigilance of the inspection. But underneath the fatigue, he felt something unexpected. Confidence. In his previous life, this inspection had been different. He'd been 3 months into the job, still disconnected from the reality of countryside work. And when the inspectors came, he'd had nothing to show them except paperwork. They'd found the county lacking and recommended closer supervision from the prefecture level, a humiliation that had undermined Secretary W's authority and made Chenwei's already difficult position nearly impossible. This time, he'd shown them actual work. Problems? Yes. But also solutions. Competence, if not perfection. Dr. Lin was in their shared room when Chenwei returned, reading by lamplight. "How did it go?" Lin asked. "I don't know. They didn't arrest anyone, so that's positive." Lin smiled slightly. "The bar for success gets lower every year." He marked his place in the book, a medical text in English, which explained why Lin's English was so good. "For what it's worth, the talk in Third Village is that you've impressed the old farmers. They didn't think a Beijing boy would last a week in the paddies." "What do they think now?" "That you might be slightly less useless than expected." Chenwei laughed. "High praise." "The highest." Lin set aside his book. "There's a letter for you. From Beijing." The envelope was on Chenwei's desk, cream-colored, good-quality paper. Yang Mei's handwriting. He opened it without ceremony. Read quickly. "Wege, your letter was so brief. I was hoping for more details about your new life. How is the work? Are the people treating you well? Is the food tolerable? Things in Beijing are very busy. I've been given additional responsibilities in the ministry. Not a promotion yet, but the leadership is noticing my work. Uncle Zhang's death was a setback, but I'm rebuilding connections. Minister Jiang's secretary has been very helpful. I miss you. I think about you every day. Please write more often. Tell me everything. I want to feel like I'm there with you. 2 years will pass quickly. I promise. Always yours." Mei Chenwei read the letter twice. The first time he felt the old familiar pull. She missed him. She was thinking of him. She promised it would only be 2 years. The second time, he noticed what the letter actually said. She was busy. She was rebuilding connections. She wanted him to write more often, to invest emotional energy in maintaining their connection, but she offered nothing concrete in return. No timeline, no plan. Just 2 years will pass quickly. Except in his previous life, 2 years had become 5, had become forever. He pulled out paper and wrote, Mei Mei, I'm glad the ministry is recognizing your work. You've always been very talented. The work here is challenging, but educational. The people are capable and honest. The food is simple, but sufficient. I'm settling in well. I don't think you need to worry about me. Take care of yourself. Focus on your career. I'll be fine. Chen Wei had read it over. It was polite, kind, even, but it was also a door closing. No endearments, no promises, no invitation for her to continue these letters. Lin was watching him. Bad news from Beijing? No, just a relationship ending? I'm sorry. Don't be. Chen Wei folded the letter. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is stop waiting for them to save you. He set the letter aside to mail tomorrow, then washed his face, changed into clean clothes, and sat down to review the notes he'd made during the inspection. Tomorrow, Secretary Wu would have the inspector's verdict. Or tomorrow, Chen Wei would know if his approach had been right or if he'd made a catastrophic error. But tonight, he felt certain of one thing. He'd shown them the truth. And if the truth wasn't good enough, then at least he'd failed honestly. The lamp burned low. Outside, the night sounds of the countryside, crickets, distant voices, the wind in the trees. Chen Wei wrote until his eyes burned. Planning tomorrow's work, recording today's observations, building slowly and carefully the foundation of something that might actually matter. And when he finally slept, he dreamed not of Beijing, but of rice paddies and irrigation channels and the long, patient work of making things grow. The cicadas were deafening. Chen Wei stood in Secretary Wu's courtyard at midday, the sun beating down, the air thick and still. Beside him, the Deputy Secretary Zhao mopped his forehead with a handkerchief. Inside the office, Secretary Wu was meeting with the inspection team for their final discussion before they returned to the Prefecture capital. They'd been in there for 2 hours. Stop pacing, Zhao said. You're making me nervous. Chen Wei hadn't realized he was pacing. He stopped, forced himself to stand still. The cicadas shrieked in the trees, their sound rising and falling in waves. When I was young, Zhao said conversationally, I thought cicadas were screaming because they were in pain. My mother told me they were singing because they were happy to be alive. 17 years underground, she said, and then one summer to sing before they die. I never decided which interpretation I believed. Maybe both are true, Chen Wei said. Zhao looked at him. Whoa, that's a very administrative answer. Everything can be 2 things at once in your world, yes? In everyone's world, we just pretend otherwise for the sake of simplicity. The office door opened. Secretary Wu stepped out, his expression unreadable. Behind him came the lead inspector. Comrade Chen Wei, the inspector said, please join us. The office was cooler, at least. Chen Wei sat in the indicated chair. Secretary Wu took his position behind the desk. The 2 subordinate inspectors stood by the wall, notebooks in hand. We've completed our review, the lead inspector said. Our report to the prefecture will note the following. First, Chingshan County is behind quota in all 3 major production areas, rice, tea, and timber. This is concerning and must be addressed. Second, some of the causes of the shortfall are documented with unusual thoroughness. Infrastructure challenges, labor allocation issues, and market factors are all clearly identified. Third, remediation plans are in place for most identified problems. These plans appear practical and achievable, though results remain to be seen. Fourth, the current county leadership demonstrates competence and honest assessment of challenges, which is preferable to inflated claims of success. He paused, looked directly at Chen Wei. Fifth, the new administrator from Beijing has integrated into rural work with commendable speed. His reports are detailed and accurate. His presence in the fields suggests genuine commitment to understanding agricultural work rather than mere theoretical administration. Chen Wei kept his expression neutral, waited. However, the inspector continued, we have concerns about certain unconventional approaches. Delaying infrastructure repairs, for instance, acknowledging shortfalls in official reports rather than finding ways to meet quota through creative accounting. Creative accounting is lying, Chen Wei said before he could stop himself. The room went very still. The inspector's eyebrow rose. That's a bold statement, Comrade Chen. It's a true statement. If the quota is unrealistic given current conditions, then meeting it through false reporting doesn't serve the people. It just makes the problem invisible until it becomes catastrophic. And you think you're better qualified than the prefecture leadership to determine what quotas are realistic? No, Chen Wei said carefully. But I'm better qualified than the prefecture leadership to determine what Chingshan County's actual production is. If that information is inconvenient for someone's plan, that's not my problem. My problem is making sure the information is accurate. Secretary Wu made a small sound. It might have been approval or a warning to shut up. Chen Wei couldn't tell which. The inspector studied him. You realize that attitude could be interpreted as politically unreliable. It could be, Chen Wei agreed. Or it could be interpreted as taking the directive to seek truth from facts seriously. Another pause. Then the inspector smiled, a small, dry expression that might have been amusement. You're either very brave or very stupid, Comrade Chen. I haven't decided which. He turned to Secretary Wu. Our recommendation will be that Chingshan County continue current policies, no additional supervision required. Progress to be reviewed again in 6 months. The tension in the room released like a cut rope. However, the inspector added, we will also recommend that Comrade Chen Wei be monitored for signs of rightist deviation. His enthusiasm for acknowledging problems could, in less capable hands, become an excuse for defeatism. Understood, Secretary Wu said. I'll ensure proper political education continues. The inspector stood. The meeting was over. They exchanged the standard revolutionary farewells. Serve the people, revolutionary vigilance, long live Chairman Mao. Then the inspectors were gone, climbing into their jeep and disappearing in a cloud of dust down the dirt road. Secretary Wu sat heavily in his chair, pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. You, he said to Chen Wei, are going to give me a heart attack. I'm sorry, Secretary, I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. Another drag. But you were right. Creative accounting is lying. That's the kind of thing that gets you labeled a rightist and sent somewhere that makes Chingshan County look like paradise. I know. Do you? Do you really? Wu leaned forward. I've been party secretary here for 8 years. I've seen 3 administrators come through before you. The first was a true believer who thought Mao's quotas were sacred, and anyone who failed to meet them was sabotaging the revolution. He lasted 6 months before he had a nervous breakdown trying to force reality to match the plan. The second was a cynic who didn't care about anything except avoiding trouble. He lasted 3 years and accomplished nothing. The third was arrested for embezzlement after he tried to make quota by selling government equipment. And now you have me. Now I have you, a Beijing intellectual who gets in mud puddles and tells prefecture inspectors they're wrong to their faces. Wu stubbed out his cigarette. I can't decide if you're the best thing that's happened to this county or a disaster waiting to unfold. Chen Wei thought about his previous life, about the decades of careful mediocrity, of never taking risks, of always choosing safety over significance. Secretary Wu, he said, what if I could make Chingshan County exceed quota? Not through creative accounting, through actual improvement in production. Wu barked a laugh. I'd say you'd been in the sun too long. I'm serious. Give me a year. Let me try something. Try what? I'm still working out the details, but I've noticed. Chen Wei pulled out his notebook, the one where he'd been recording observations. We have 17 villages, right? And each village has its own party secretary who manages production. But there's no coordination between villages. 3rd village is short workers because of flu, while 4th village has surplus labor. 6th village has excellent tea cultivation, while 7th village struggles with the same plants. Everyone is working in isolation. That's just how it works, Wu said. It doesn't have to be. What if we created a system for sharing resources and knowledge? What if the best tea farmers in 6th village trained farmers in other villages? What if we redistributed labor based on actual need rather than administrative boundaries? Oh, what if... You're describing a massive reorganization of how we've done things for years. Yes, Wu lit another cigarette, smoked it halfway down before speaking. You know what happens to people who propose massive reorganizations. They get accused of being counter-revolutionaries, trying to undermine the collective system. Unless the reorganization improves production, then they get commended for innovative application of mass line principles. You've got an answer for everything, don't you? No, Chen Wei said honestly. I've got questions for everything, but I think some of those questions might lead to useful answers. Wu studied him through the cigarette smoke. How old are you again? 24. 24? And you think you can revolutionize countryside administration? I think I can make things marginally better. If that's revolutionary, then the bar for revolution is very low. A long silence. Then Wu stood, walked to the window. Outside, workers were moving through the fields, their blue clothing forming patterns against the green of growing rice. 1 year, he said finally. You can try your coordination system or whatever you want to call it, but you clear every step with me first. You document everything. And if it fails, I take full responsibility. If it fails, we both probably get purged, but at least we'll go down trying something interesting. Wu turned from the window. Now get out of my office. I have actual work to do. Chen Wei stood, bowed slightly. Thank you, Secretary. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if we're both still here this time next year. Outside, the cicadas were still screaming their one summer of life. Xiao Chenwei walked back to his office through the midday heat, his mind already racing with plans. In his previous life, he'd spent his first year waiting for Yang Mei's letters, waiting for the transfer that would never come, waiting for his real life to begin. This time, he would build. The office was empty when he arrived. Good. He needed quiet to think. He spread out his notes on the desk, observations from each village, production data, labor statistics, resource inventories. The pattern was there if you looked for it. Inefficiency. Not because people were lazy or incompetent, but because the system forced them to optimize locally rather than globally. Each village trying to be self-sufficient in everything, even things they were terrible at. Because that's what the administrative structure demanded. But what if you could change that structure? What if 6th village focused entirely on tea because they were excellent at it, and 8th village focused on rice, and everyone specialized according to their actual strengths? It would require trust, coordination, a total rethinking of how resources were allocated. It would be risky, politically dangerous, probably impossible. Chen Wei smiled and started writing. He was still writing when Dr. Lin came in hours later, surprised to find the lamp burning. Working late? Planning something that will either make my career or end it, Chen Wei said. Those are usually the same thing. Lin set down his medical bag. There's another letter from Beijing on your desk. Chen Wei glanced at it. Yang Mei's handwriting again. He set it aside, unopened. Not interested in news from your girlfriend? Lin asked. Former girlfriend. And no, she's part of a life I'm not living anymore. Lin nodded slowly. So, what life are you living instead? Chen Wei looked at his notes, at the plants spreading across the desk like roots seeking water. This one, he said, right here. And outside, the cicadas sang their brief and urgent song, counting down the days until silence. 3 months passed in a blur of work. Chen Wei's coordination system started small, just 2 villages, 3rd and 4th, sharing labor during the tea harvest. The party secretaries were skeptical, but Secretary Wu had given approval, so they cooperated. Grudgingly. The first week was chaos. 3rd village farmers insisted on one picking technique, 4th village on another. Arguments broke out over which method was correct. Tools went missing. 2 farmers got into a fistfight over tea basket allocation. Chen Wei spent those 7 days mediating, documenting, learning that his beautiful theoretical system collapsed immediately when it touched human stubbornness. But by the 2nd week, something shifted. A 4th village farmer noticed that 3rd village's method actually produced better quality leaves. 3rd village farmers noticed that 4th village had better baskets. Someone suggested combining the techniques. Someone else offered to teach the basket-making method. By the end of the month, the combined teams had harvested 30% more tea than either village had managed alone the previous year. Word spread. I hear you're doing interesting things with labor coordination, Chief Engineer Huang said one evening, we finding Chen Wei in the office going over harvest reports. Think it would work for infrastructure projects? I don't know. Maybe. What did you have in mind? Huang spread out plans for the irrigation channel repair. I need skilled workers, but each village only has 1 or 2. If I pull them from their villages for the repair, those villages fall behind on other work. But if I could coordinate, You could rotate workers from multiple villages, concentrating skill when you need it without depleting any single village's labor pool. Chen Wei finished. Exactly. They stayed up until midnight working out the details. By dawn, they had a plan that would repair the irrigation channel in half the time with better quality, using coordinated labor from 5 villages, instead of trying to muddle through with third village's limited resources. Secretary Wu approved it with a single condition. Document everything. If this works, I want to be able to show the Prefecture exactly how we did it. The channel repair became the proof of concept. Workers from 5 villages, each bringing their specialized skills. Stonemasons from 6th village, excavation experts from 8th, timber workers from 10th for the support structures. Chief Engineer Huang coordinated them with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. The repair finished 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Water loss dropped from 15% to less than 2%. And 5 villages that had previously viewed each other with suspicion started talking about other projects they could coordinate. "You've stumbled onto something," Deputy Secretary Zhao said. Watching workers from multiple villages celebrating together after the channel dedication ceremony, this coordination approach, it's not just about efficiency, it's building relationships, trust. Trust is just another kind of infrastructure, Chen Wei said, harder to quantify, but just as essential. Write that down. That's the kind of phrase that sounds good in reports. So Chen Wei wrote, reports on labor coordination, analysis of production improvements, careful political framing about innovative application of mass line principles, and learning from the masses to serve the masses. The reports went to Secretary Wu, who sent them up to the prefecture, and waited. Meanwhile, letters from Yang Mei continued arriving. Chen Wei read them with decreasing interest. Wei Ge, why are you being so distant? Your letters are so brief. So impersonal. Have I done something wrong? I ran into your friend Joe at a reception. He asked about you. I didn't know what to tell him. You haven't told me anything about your life there. Minister Zhang's secretary mentioned that there might be openings in the agricultural planning office next year. If I could get you into one of those positions, but I'd need to know you're still interested. Are you? He responded politely but without warmth. Yes, he was well. No, he didn't need anything. She should focus on her career without worrying about him. The gaps between her letters grew longer. Dr. Lin noticed. You're being cruel, you know? How so? Chen Wei asked. They were in their shared room, Lin reading medical journals, Chen Wei writing another coordination proposal. She clearly cares about you. Chen Wei, and you're freezing her out. I'm setting her free. She just doesn't realize she wants to be free yet. That's not your decision to make. Chen Wei set down his pen. In Beijing, there's a phrase I heard once. Don't cling to someone who's already falling. Yang Mei is climbing, not falling. But the principle is the same. I'm not going to weigh her down with a relationship neither of us actually wants anymore. How do you know she doesn't want it? Because if she did, she'd be here, or I'd be there. Real love doesn't live in letters and promises. It lives in choices. And we're both choosing differently now. Lin was quiet for a moment. You've gotten very philosophical since you arrived. I've gotten very practical. So philosophy is just another tool for understanding how things actually work, instead of how we wish they worked. The final letter from Yang Mei came in November, as the first frost touched the mountains. Chen Wei, I understand. You've made a life there. I've made a life here. We're different people than we were on that train platform. I won't pretend I'm not hurt. I thought we had something real. But maybe you're right. Maybe real means something different than I believed. I'm seeing someone, Vice Minister Jiang's nephew. He's suitable. We understand each other. We want the same things. I hope you find what you're looking for in Chingshan County. I hope you're happy. I won't write again. Yang Mei Chen Wei read the letter twice, then filed it away. Felt a small pang, not of loss, but of closure. The door that had been slowly swinging shut for months finally clicked into place. Are you all right? Lin asked, seeing his expression. Yes, Chen Wei said, surprised to find it was true. I think I actually am. That night, he dreamed of his previous life. Of dying alone in a hospital bed, Yang Mei's telegram from decades ago still a source of bitter regret. Of wondering what might have been if he'd been braver, bolder, more willing to choose himself instead of always choosing to wait. He woke before dawn, the dream fading, but its lesson sharp. He'd spent one lifetime waiting. He wouldn't spend another. Outside, winter was coming. The rice harvest was complete. Record yield, 32% above quota. The tea production had exceeded targets for the first time in 5 years. Even timber, the most challenging sector, was approaching quota. Secretary Wu called a county leadership meeting to discuss the results. "The prefecture is impressed," he announced, laying out the response he'd received. "Very impressed. They want a detailed report on our coordination methodology. They're considering implementing it in other counties as a pilot program." Murmurs around the table. This was unprecedented. Chingshan County, usually struggling to meet minimums, suddenly being held up as an example. "There's more," Wu continued. "The Prefecture Party Committee wants to send an observation team next spring. They want to see the coordination system in action, and they specifically requested that Comrade Chen Wei present the theoretical framework." All eyes turned to Chen Wei. "This is political exposure," Liang said carefully. The propaganda director had been watching Chen Wei's rise with increasing wariness. If the presentation goes well, it's a major opportunity. If it goes poorly, "I understand the risks," Chen Wei said. "Do you?" Liang leaned forward. "Because from where I sit, you're a 24-year-old who's been here less than a year, about to stand in front of prefecture leadership and claim you've revolutionized agricultural administration. That's either brilliant or suicidal." "It's necessary," Secretary Wu cut in. "The coordination system works. The data proves it. Comrade Chen Wei developed it, so Comrade Chen Wei presents it. Unless you have concerns about his political reliability, Director Liang?" A charged moment, Liang's eyes never left Chen Wei's face. "No concerns," Liang said finally. "Just advice. Be very careful how you frame this. Emphasize collective achievement, mass participation, learning from the people. Don't make it sound like one intellectual from Beijing swooped in and fixed everything." "I won't," Chen Wei said, "because that's not what happened. The farmers figured out most of this. I just wrote it down and found ways to systematize it." Liang nodded slowly. "Good. Remember that when you're in front of the prefecture committee." The meeting continued. Plans for winter work, budget allocations, preparations for next year's planting. Chen Wei took notes, contributed when relevant, and felt the weight of expectations settling on his shoulders. 6 months. He had 6 months to prepare a presentation that could make or break not just his career, but the entire county's political standing. No pressure. He stayed late in the office after the meeting, reviewing his documentation. The coordination system had 4 key components. 1. Resource mapping, detailed inventory of each village's strengths, weaknesses, labor capacity, equipment, and expertise. 2. Flexible allocation. Ability to shift resources across village boundaries based on actual need rather than administrative rigidity. 3. Knowledge sharing. Systematic transfer of best practices from high-performing to low-performing units. 4. Collective accountability. Villages succeeded or failed together, reducing the incentive to hoard resources or hide problems. It sounded simple on paper. In practice, it had required months of relationship building, conflict resolution, and constant adjustment. How did you present that to a room of political officials who wanted clear, replicable procedures? Chen Wei was still wrestling with the question when the door opened. Director Ma, the education official, entered carrying a stack of student notebooks. "Saw your light on," Ma said. "Thought you might want to see these." The notebooks contained essays from 5th Village's school. The assignment had been, describe how your village works together. Chen Wei read through them. The students wrote about their parents working in other villages, learning new techniques, making friends across traditional boundaries. They wrote about the channel repair, the tea harvest, the shared celebration dinners. They wrote about something that hadn't existed 6 months ago, a sense of connection larger than their individual villages. "This," Ma said quietly, "is what you present to the prefecture. Not the production statistics, though those matter. This, the human dimension, the way you've started to change how people think about community." Chen Wei looked up. "You think they'll care about that?" "I think some will. And those are the ones whose support you need." Ma gathered the notebooks. "The bureaucrats will look at your numbers. The ideologues will look at your political framing. But the leaders who actually understand governance, they'll look at whether you've built something sustainable, something that makes people's lives better. And you think I have? I think you're starting to, which is more than most administrators achieve in a career, let alone a year." After Ma left, Chen Wei sat with those words. Starting to. Not finished, not perfect, just beginning. He thought about his previous life, about the decades of slow, steady, unremarkable work, about dying with the certainty that he'd never built anything that mattered. This time, he was building something. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. He returned to his presentation notes with renewed purpose. Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season, covering Chingshan County in white silence. Chenwei worked through the night, his lamp a small point of warmth against the winter dark. And in Beijing, Yangmei was probably at some ministry reception, making connections, building her career, her life moving forward without him. He wished her well. He had his own life to build. The Prefecture observation team arrived on a day when frost still clung to the shadows, and the sky was the pale gray of old silk. Chenwei stood in the county office courtyard, wearing his best, only cadre uniform, watching the convoy of vehicles roll up the dirt road. 3 cars. Significant. This wasn't a cursory inspection, but a serious investigation. Secretary Wu stood beside him, rigid with tension. Deputy Secretary Zhao was making small adjustments to his collar, a nervous tick. The other directors were arranged in order of rank, waiting. The first person out of the lead vehicle was a woman. This was unexpected. Women held administrative positions, certainly, but it was rare to see one leading a prefecture delegation. She was perhaps 45, with sharp eyes, and the kind of efficient movements that suggested impatience with unnecessary formality. "Secretary Wu," she said, shaking his hand, "I'm Deputy Director Wang from the Prefecture Planning Commission. Thank you for hosting us. The honor is ours." "Deputy Director?" Wang's eyes swept the assembled officials and landed on Chen Wei. "You must be Comrade Chen from Beijing." "Yes, Deputy Director." "Good. I want to see everything. Not the prepared tour, the actual work. Starting with the villages where this coordination system failed." Chen Wei blinked. "Failed?" "Nothing succeeds everywhere. If you're telling me every village embraced this perfectly, you're lying. So show me where it didn't work and explain why." Secretary Wu looked like he wanted to object. Chen Wei spoke first. 7th and 9th villages. The party secretaries resisted coordination, worried it would undermine their authority. We've had limited success integrating them into the system. Wang nodded. "Take me there. Now." So the carefully planned tour was abandoned. Instead, then they piled into vehicles and drove to 7th village, where Party Secretary Gao met them with poorly concealed hostility. "Deputy Director," Gao said stiffly, "we were not informed you would be visiting." "Good," Wang said. "Then I'll see things as they actually are. Comrade Chen, why has this village resisted coordination?" All eyes on him. This was a test, Chen Wei realized. Wang wanted to see how he handled criticism in front of the resistant party secretary. "Secretary Gao has concerns about maintaining village autonomy," Chen Wei said carefully. "He's worried that coordinating with other villages will result in 7th village's resources being drained to benefit others without reciprocal benefit. And is he right to worry? Partially. The coordination system requires trust that other villages will reciprocate when 7th village needs help. Secretary Gao hasn't seen enough evidence that this trust is warranted." Wang turned to Gao. "Is that accurate?" Gao looked surprised at being asked directly. "Yes, Deputy Director. When 6th village needed workers for their tea harvest, we sent 10 people. But when we needed help with our timber operation, 6th village claimed they had no one to spare." "Did you document this?" Wang asked Chen Wei. "Yes, it's in the coordination failure reports." "Show me." They moved to Gao's office, where Chen Wei pulled out the relevant documentation. The exchange was recorded, 7th village providing labor, 6th village failing to reciprocate. Chen Wei had noted it as a coordination breakdown requiring intervention. "What intervention did you propose?" Wang asked. "I suggested a meeting between the 2 party secretaries to discuss the breakdown and establish clearer reciprocity expectations." Secretary Gao declined. Gao bristled. "Because it would have been humiliating, begging 6th village to uphold their obligations?" "Not begging," Chen Wei interrupted gently. "Negotiating. The coordination system only works if both parties communicate clearly about expectations and hold each other accountable. When communication breaks down, the whole system fails." Wang was taking notes. "So the failure wasn't in the system design but in implementation?" "Both," Chen Wei said honestly. "The design assumed all party secretaries would be equally willing to communicate openly. That assumption was naive. Because some leaders are more comfortable with confrontation than others. The system needs a formal dispute resolution mechanism, not just informal mediation. Have you designed one? I've drafted a proposal. Secretary Wu hasn't approved it yet because it would require prefecture-level backing to give it teeth. Wang looked at Wu. Why not? Wu shifted uncomfortably. Because creating a formal dispute resolution mechanism implies we can't handle problems internally. It looks like weakness. Or it looks like honest assessment of human nature, Wang said. Chen Wei, I want to see this proposal. The rest of the day followed the same pattern. Wang demanded to see not the successes, but the failures, the problems, the places where Chen Wei's beautiful theory crashed into messy reality. They visited Ninth Village, where the party secretary had simply ignored all coordination requests and operated in complete isolation. They reviewed Third Village's experience, where early enthusiasm had given way to frustration with the administrative burden of coordinating across villages. They examined budget allocations, discovering that some villages were effectively subsidizing others without formal acknowledgement. By evening, Chen Wei was exhausted and certain he'd destroyed any chance of the coordination system being adopted elsewhere. They returned to the county office for dinner. The meal was quiet, tense. Deputy Director Wang ate without comment, occasionally asking pointed questions about specific data points. Finally, over tea, she set down her cup. Comrade Chen Wei, she said, your coordination system is a mess. Chen Wei's heart sank. It's poorly documented in some areas, over-documented in others. The theoretical framework is inconsistent. Sometimes you're describing resource optimization, sometimes political mobilization, sometimes social relationship building. You haven't decided what you're actually trying to accomplish. She paused, took a sip of tea. It's also the most interesting administrative innovation I've seen in 5 years. And unlike most innovations, you've actually identified where it fails and why. That's rare. Most people try to hide their failures. You've documented yours. Chen Wei didn't know what to say. Here's what's going to happen, Wang continued. I'm recommending that the prefecture formally adopt a pilot version of your coordination system in 5 counties, including Chingshan. But she held up a hand as Wu started to smile. No, you're going to fix the problems first. I want a revised theoretical framework that's consistent. I want a formal dispute resolution mechanism. I want training materials for party secretaries who aren't natural coordinators. And I want realistic metrics for success that account for implementation challenges. How long do I have? Chen Wei asked. 3 months. The Prefecture Planning Committee meets in April. I want to present this to them as a serious proposal, not an interesting experiment. I'll need help. You'll have it. I'm assigning one of my staff to work with you. He's good at turning messy ideas into clean policy documents. Wang stood. Don't disappoint me, Comrade Chen. I'm taking a significant political risk advocating for a 24-year-old's half-formed system. I understand, need Deputy Director. I'm not sure you do, but you will. After Wang's team left, Secretary Wu poured baijiu for the county leadership. Well, he said, we just went from small county obscurity to prefecture attention. Everyone pray we survive it. They drank. Chen Wei excused himself early, claiming exhaustion. It was true. The day had drained him completely. But more than that, he needed to think. 3 months to transform an experimental system into formal policy. 3 months to document what had emerged organically from trial and error. 3 months to convince a prefecture planning committee that a coordination approach was worth the political and administrative risk. In his previous life, this moment had never come. He'd spent decades in obscurity, competent but unremarkable, never catching the attention of anyone who mattered. Now he had attention. The question was whether he could deliver. Back in his room, Lin was reading by lamplight. How did it go? He asked. I might have just ruined my career or made it. I'm not sure which. Those are usually the same thing, Lin said. He'd said that before. It was apparently his philosophy of life. Chen Wei sat at his desk and pulled out clean paper, started making lists. Things to fix? Theoretical framework? Inconsistent? Dispute resolution? Non-existent. Training materials? Inadequate. Success metrics? Unrealistic. Things to preserve? Flexibility in implementation? Emphasis on village autonomy? Learning from failure? Human relationships as infrastructure? Things to add? Formal documentation standards? Political safeguards? Scalability considerations? Integration with existing prefecture policies? The list grew. His hand cramped, the lamp oil burned low. Lin went to sleep. Chenwei kept writing. Sometime after midnight, he realized what he was doing wrong. He was trying to create a perfect system. Complete, comprehensive, proof against all failures. But that's not what Wang had asked for. She'd asked for something honest. Something that acknowledged its own limitations while still being useful. She'd asked for the truth. Chenwei crumpled up his lists and started over. Coordination system. A framework for inter-village resource sharing. Purpose. Not to create perfect efficiency, but to enable villages to help each other when help is needed and possible. Assumption. People are generally willing to cooperate if they trust they won't be exploited. Challenge. Building that trust in a system that has historically rewarded hoarding resources and hiding problems. Approach. He wrote until dawn. Not a perfect system, but an honest one. Not a solution to every problem, but a framework for solving specific problems together. When Lin woke, Chenwei was slumped over his desk, asleep on top of his notes. "You're going to kill yourself at this pace," Lin said, shaking him awake. "Probably," Chenwei agreed. "But at least I'll die building something instead of waiting for someone else to build it for me." Lin studied him. "You've changed. When you first arrived, you were unformed. Now you're becoming something specific. I'm not sure what yet, but something." "Neither am I," Chenwei said, "but I'm interested to find out." He gathered his notes, washed his face, put on his cleanest uniform. Outside, the frost was melting. Spring was still months away, but you could feel it in the air. The promise of growth, of new beginnings, of things taking root and pushing toward light. Chenwei walked to the office with his imperfect, honest framework tucked under his arm. The work was just beginning. April arrived with everything blooming at once. Chenwei stood in the Prefecture Planning Committee's meeting room, trying not to sweat through his uniform. 23 officials sat in tiered seating, looking down at him like judges at a trial. At the center sat Prefecture Secretary Chian, no relation, a man whose expression revealed nothing. Deputy Director Wang was off to the side, not at the main table. She'd told Chenwei that this was deliberate. She couldn't be seen advocating too strongly for her own proposal. He would have to sell it himself. "Comrade Chenwei," Prefecture Secretary Chen said, "you may begin." Chenwei had spent 3 months preparing for this moment, working with Wang's assistant, a brilliant young man named Liu, who could turn Chenwei's messy ideas into clean policy language, revising the framework 17 times, testing it in new villages, documenting every success and failure. He'd memorized the presentation, knew every statistic, every example, every theoretical justification. Now, standing in front of the prefecture leadership, he abandoned the script. "Comrades," he began, "I'd like to tell you about a fight that happened in 3rd Village 6 months ago." Surprised looks. This wasn't how policy presentations usually started. 2 farmers, I'll call them Chen and Li, got into a fistfight over tea baskets. Chen's village had sent him to help with 3rd Village's harvest as part of our new coordination system. Li was a 3rd Village farmer who didn't trust outsiders. The fight ended with a broken nose, damaged baskets, and both party secretaries threatening to withdraw from coordination entirely. He paused. Let the image settle. This fight taught me more about administration than any university course, because the question wasn't who was right. Chen followed his village's orders. Li was protecting 3rd Village's resources. They were both right, according to their own logic. The question was, why did the system create a situation where 2 farmers who should have been cooperating ended up in conflict? Chenwei pulled out his first visual aid, a simple chart showing village resource allocation before coordination. Here's how we used to work. 17 villages, each trying to be self-sufficient in everything. Rice, tea, timber, infrastructure maintenance, everything. Result, every village was mediocre at most things and excellent at nothing. And when someone like Chen showed up to help, villagers like Li saw him as a threat to scarce resources, not as additional capacity. Next chart, the coordination system structure. Here's what we tried. Villages specialize according to their actual strengths. 6th village focuses on tea because their soil and climate are ideal. 8th village emphasizes rice. Resources flow across village boundaries based on need and capacity. Theory says this should work. Comparative advantage, division of labor, economies of scale, All the principles we learned in Marxist political economy? Practice says it creates fights over tea baskets. A few smiles around the room. Good. He had their attention. So we had to ask, what makes cooperation fail? And we identified 3 critical problems. First, trust deficit. Villages that had competed for resources for decades didn't suddenly start trusting each other just because we drew up a coordination plan. Second, power imbalances. Some villages had more to offer than others. Without formal mechanisms to ensure reciprocity, stronger villages could exploit weaker ones. Third, communication failures. Party secretaries who were excellent farmers weren't necessarily skilled negotiators or coordinators. Chenwei distributed copies of the revised framework. This is our attempt to address those problems, not perfectly. Perfection is impossible, but systematically. He walked them through it. The trust-building protocols, the dispute resolution mechanism, the training program for party secretaries, the metrics that measured not just production outputs, but also coordination health. Were villages actually helping each other? Were relationships improving or degrading? Were problems being surfaced and solved? After 6 months of iteration, here are the results for Chingshan County. The production statistics flashed up. Rice yield 32% above quota. Tea, 28% above quota. Timber, finally met quota for the first time in 4 years. Impressive numbers, someone from the back row said, but Chingshan is small. How does this scale to larger counties? Chenwei had been waiting for this question. It doesn't, not directly. Surprised silence. Chingshan has 17 villages, 8,000 people. We can coordinate that with weekly meetings and 1 full-time administrator, me. A county with 50 villages and 30,000 people can't use the same structure. The coordination overhead would be unsustainable. So, you're saying your system only works for small counties? The skepticism was clear. I'm saying the specific implementation only works for small counties, but the principles scale. Larger counties would need intermediate coordinating bodies, maybe 1 coordinator per 10 villages, different communication protocols, more formalized dispute resolution. We've started designing those modifications. Based on what evidence? The challenge came from a heavy-set man at the left table. You've never administered a large county. True, Chenwei acknowledged, but Deputy Director Wang has, and her team has been helping adapt the framework for different county sizes. What I'm presenting today is the small county version, which we know works. The adaptations for larger counties are theoretical, but based on solid administrative logic. Wang spoke up. If I may, Prefecture Secretary, we've run simulations on the larger county adaptations. The math works. Obviously, we'd want to pilot them before full implementation, but the theoretical foundation is sound. Prefecture Secretary Chen leaned forward. Comrade Chenwei, I have a different concern. Your system requires party secretaries to cooperate across traditional boundaries. What happens when a party secretary refuses? You've designed dispute resolution, but what if someone simply won't participate? This was the hard question. Chenwei had known it would come. Then we let them opt out, he said. Coordination is voluntary. Villages that want to participate, villages that don't. We've learned that forced cooperation is worse than no cooperation, but that creates 2-tier system. Villages that coordinate benefit from the system. Villages that don't fall behind. That's not equitable. No, it's not, Chenwei agreed. But equity sometimes means letting people make different choices and experience different consequences. If a party secretary genuinely believes isolation serves their village better than cooperation, they should be free to test that belief. Most discover they're wrong within a year and ask to join the coordination system. The few who don't, well, their villages suffer. But that's the result of their choice. You're comfortable with some villages suffering due to poor leadership? I'm comfortable with poor leaders facing the consequences of their decisions, rather than hiding those consequences through creative accounting. Suffering can be a teacher if we let it be. The room was very quiet. That's a bold position, Prefecture Secretary Chen said. Some would call it rightist deviation, accepting inequality and calling it freedom of choice. Chenwei's mouth was dry. This was the moment where he could be labeled politically unreliable, where his whole career could end. With respect, Prefecture Secretary, I'd argue it's the opposite. Forcing villages to cooperate when they don't want to is bureaucratic commandism. So letting them choose and then helping them understand the consequences of those choices is the mass line in action. We learn from the people, including learning from their mistakes. Another long silence. Then Prefecture Secretary Chen smiled, a small, dry expression. Deputy Director Wang, you found yourself quite the provocateur. I prefer to think of him as honest Prefecture Secretary. Honest and provocateur aren't mutually exclusive. Chen turned back to Chen Wei. I'm going to approve a limited pilot. 5 counties, as Deputy Director Wang proposed, but with conditions. Yes, Prefecture Secretary? First, you'll personally oversee the implementation in all 5 counties. That means travel, training, problem solving. Can you handle that while maintaining your duties in Chingshan? If Secretary Wu can spare me, yes. Second, you'll report directly to Deputy Director Wang monthly. Not summary reports, detailed accounts of what's working and what's failing. I want the truth, not propaganda. You'll have it. Third, if after 1 year this pilot shows no clear improvements, we shut it down. No arguments, no excuses. Understood? Understood. Good. Chen stood. This meeting is adjourned. Comrade Chen Wei, remain behind. The rest of you are dismissed. The room emptied. Chen Wei stood alone with Prefecture Secretary Chen and Deputy Director Wang. When the door closed, Chen relaxed visibly. Sit down, both of you, and drop the formality. That performance was exhausting. Chen Wei sat, confused. Performance? Comrade Chen Wei, the Prefecture Secretary said, his tone entirely different now, less official, more human. That was well done. Throa, you handled the political challenges exactly right. Acknowledged problems instead of hiding them. Defended your ideas without being defensive. Showed humility without being weak. Wang, you were right about him? I usually am about people, Wang said, though he's even better under pressure than I expected. What just happened? Chen Wei asked. Politics, Wang said. Half that committee wanted to approve the pilot before you even presented. The other half wanted to reject it. The performance was for the undecided middle. You needed to show them you could handle scrutiny and criticism without folding. And those hard questions were from my allies, Prefecture Secretary Chen said. Testing you, yes, but also giving you opportunities to demonstrate competence. The real opposition kept silent. They're hoping you'll fail in implementation. Chen Wei's head was spinning. So the approval was never in doubt? The approval was always in doubt, Wang corrected. But you shifted the odds in your favor. Now you just have to deliver. 5 counties in 1 year. 5 counties in 1 year, she confirmed. Think you can do it? Chen Wei thought about his previous life, about the decades of safe, small choices, about dying without ever risking anything that mattered. Yes, he said. I can do it. Good. Prefecture Secretary Chin handed him a folder. Here are your 5 counties. Different sizes, different leadership, different challenges. You'll start next month. Wang will provide administrative support, but the work is yours. Chen Wei opened the folder, scanned the county profiles. They saw immediately that this would be brutal. The 5 counties were deliberately selected to test different aspects of the coordination system. One more thing, Chen said. Your old girlfriend, Yang Mei. She's apparently been making inquiries about you through Ministry of Agriculture channels, trying to arrange a transfer back to Beijing for you. Chen Wei looked up sharply. I didn't ask her to do that. I know, and I've made it clear to the ministry that you're critical personnel in an important prefecture pilot program and cannot be reassigned, but I wanted you to be aware. She's persistent. She's ambitious, Chen Wei corrected, and I'm a project she doesn't like leaving unfinished. I'll write to her and make it clear I'm not interested in a transfer. See that you do. I can't have my best young administrator distracted by romantic complications. Cho Chen stood, signaling the meeting was over. Congratulations, Comrade Chen. You just became the youngest coordination specialist in the prefecture. Try not to let it kill you. Outside, spring rain was falling. Chen Wei stood in the courtyard, letting it soak his uniform. The folder of county profiles clutched against his chest. Wang came up beside him. Having second thoughts? Third and fourth thoughts. Maybe fifth. Good. Doubt keeps you sharp. It's the people who are certain they're right who make catastrophic mistakes. Is this your version of a pep talk? This is my version of truth. You'll make mistakes. The question is whether you'll learn from them or repeat them. Chen Wei looked at the rain. In at the Prefecture building where he'd just committed to a year of brutal work, at the future stretching out uncertain and challenging and entirely different from the safe mediocrity of his previous life. "I'll learn," he said. "I believe you will." Huang turned to go, then paused. "And Chenwei, that thing you said about suffering being a teacher if we let it be? Write that down. Develop it. There's a philosophical framework there that could be useful beyond just agricultural coordination." She left him in the rain. Chenwei opened the folder again, read the county profiles more carefully, saw the problems waiting for him: resistant party secretaries, resource shortages, political complications, saw the opportunity. In his previous life, he'd been safe, competent but unremarkable, never risking enough to fail, so never risking enough to succeed. This time, he was risking everything. And for the first time in either lifetime, he felt fully alive. He walked through the rain back to his quarters, already planning the work ahead. 1 year, 5 counties. Everything to prove. He smiled. Let's see what happens. The circuit started in Jinghe County. Chenwei arrived on a humid morning in May, his bag packed with coordination frameworks, training materials, and a growing sense that he might have bitten off more than he could chew. Jinghe was 3 times the size of Chingshan, 47 villages, 22,000 people, and a party secretary who had already sent word that he was skeptical of experimental systems from unproven theorists. Great start. Secretary Huang met him at the bus station. Older, perhaps 60, with the careful movements of someone whose body had been worn down by decades of hard labor. His handshake was firm, but not warm. "Comrade Chenwei," Huang said, "the prefecture says I must cooperate with your pilot program, so I will cooperate. But I will not waste my county's resources on nonsense." "Fair enough," Chenwei said. "Can we start with understanding what you consider nonsense?" That got a flicker of interest. "You're not going to defend your system? I'm going to listen to your concerns and then decide if my system addresses them or if it really is nonsense for Jinghe County." Huang studied him. "You're younger than I expected. I get that a lot. Come, I'll show you why your pretty coordination ideas won't work here." They drove through Jinghe's territory. The landscape was different from Chingshan. Flatter, more rivers, a rich alluvial soil perfect for rice, but challenging for infrastructure. Every spring, floods came. Every summer, they rebuilt. Chingshan County is homogeneous, Huang explained as they passed village after village. Your 17 villages are similar in size, resources, culture. Coordination is easy when everyone starts from roughly the same position. And Jinghe isn't homogeneous? Look, Huang pointed to a village on higher ground. That's Yongning Village, 200 households. Best rice land in the county, never floods. They're rich by rural standards. Now look there. He pointed to a smaller village in the floodplain. Xiaohe Village, 60 households, floods 3 times a year, barely surviving. You think Yongning will share resources with Xiaohe? You think they'll coordinate? In Chingshan, 6th Village had similar resistance to helping smaller villages. And how did you solve it? I didn't, Chenwei admitted. I documented the failure and moved on. Some villages don't coordinate. That's part of the system. Huang's eyebrows rose. You're admitting your system doesn't work universally. Of course it doesn't work universally. No system does. The question is whether it works better than what you have now for enough villages to justify the administrative overhead. Honest. Huang sounded surprised. The last 3 experts from the prefecture promised me revolutionary transformations and delivered nothing. I'm not promising transformations. I'm offering tools. Whether they work here depends on factors I haven't discovered yet. They spent the next week on assessment. Chenwei visited villages. He talked to party secretaries, mapped resources and relationships. He took notes constantly, asked questions, listened more than he spoke. What he discovered, Jinghe's challenges were fundamentally different from Chingshan's. The wealth disparities were larger. The flood cycle created boom-bust patterns that made long-term coordination difficult. And the county's proximity to the prefecture capital meant more political scrutiny and less room for experimentation. Your framework won't work here without major modifications, he told Huang at the end of the week. I could have told you that on day 1. You did, but I needed to understand why. Chenwei spread out his notes. The coordination system assumes relatively stable resource availability. Jinghe has violent seasonal variations. So we need to adapt. Create strategic reserves during boom periods, shared across village boundaries, managed collectively. Shared reserves? Huang looked skeptical. Villages won't contribute to something other villages might benefit from. Not unless there's a forcing mechanism. What if we made flood relief conditional on reserve contribution? Villages that participate in the collective reserve system get priority access to prefecture emergency aid. Villages that don't handle floods independently. You're proposing we let villages suffer if they don't cooperate? I'm proposing we let villages choose. Cooperate and access collective resources. Don't cooperate and rely on individual capacity. Make the incentives clear. Huang was quiet for a long moment. That's ruthless. That's honest. Right now, villages free ride on emergency aid whether they prepare for floods or not. So they don't prepare. Your flood relief costs are catastrophic every year because you're subsidizing poor planning. And you think changing the incentive structure will change behavior? I think it's worth testing in a few villages and seeing what happens. Huang pulled out a map, marked 5 villages. These are my biggest flood problems. Chronically underprepared, always needing rescue. If your system can change their behavior, I'll expand it. If not, we shut down the pilot, and you go back to the prefecture having learned something useful. Deal. The work in Jingyi consumed 3 weeks. Chenwei lived in a rotating series of village quarters, working with party secretaries to design the modified coordination system. Some were enthusiastic. Most were skeptical. A few were openly hostile. The breakthrough came in Xiaohe village, the flood-prone settlement Huang had shown him the first day. Party Secretary Lu was young, perhaps 35, and desperate enough to try anything. Every spring we rebuild, Lu said, showing Chenwei the flood damage from the previous season. Every summer we watch the water rise and wonder if this is the year we lose everything. The prefecture sends emergency aid, we survive, and then we do it all again next year. Why don't you relocate to higher ground? Where? The good land is taken. Moving means giving up our rice paddies, and rice is our only income. What if you specialized in something else? Something that doesn't require vulnerable floodplain agriculture? Like what? Chenwei looked around. The village sat at the confluence of 2 rivers. Terrible for permanent structures, but the waterways themselves were an asset. Fish farming, he said. Managed aquaculture. Use the flood cycle instead of fighting it. Let the water bring nutrients, control the fish population, harvest before the next flood. We don't know anything about fish farming. Does anyone in Jinghe? Minghe village on the eastern border. They've been doing it for generations. Then that's your coordination opportunity. Minghe shares expertise, Xiaohe provides labor, you split the profits. When the coordination works, you contribute to the collective reserve. When you need flood relief, the reserve helps rebuild. Liu's eyes were bright with possibility. You think this could work? I think it might. Which is better than certainty it won't. They spent a week setting up the pilot. Chenwei traveled to Minghe village, negotiated the knowledge-sharing arrangement, designed the profit split mechanism, brought party secretaries from both villages together to work out details, documented everything. The initial results were promising. Xiaohe's first fish harvest yielded enough profit to start contributing to a reserve fund. Minghe benefited from Xiaohe's labor during peak harvest season. Both villages started talking about expanding the collaboration. Secretary Huang watched this with careful interest. When Chenwei prepared to leave for the next county on his circuit, Huang pulled him aside. You've shown me something I didn't expect, Huang said. Not perfection, but possibility. That's rare. Will you expand the pilot? Cautiously. No. 3 more villages. We'll test the collective reserve concept for 1 full flood season. If it works, we expand. If it fails, we learn and try something else. That's all I can ask for. One more thing. Huang handed Chenwei an envelope. Letter from Secretary Wu, arrived 2 days ago. Chenwei opened it. Wei, Chingshan County is falling apart without you. Who knew you were holding everything together? Deputy Secretary Zhao is doing his best, but coordination is harder than it looks. Come back when you can. We miss having someone who can turn chaos into something productive. Also, Prefecture Secretary Chen is asking about you. Says the word in the capital is that your pilot program is interesting. That's the kind of political attention that can help or hurt. Be careful. Wu Chenwei folded the letter. Sir missed Chingshan more than he expected, but the circuit wasn't finished. 4 more counties to visit, 8 more months to prove the system worked beyond one small county's specific conditions. He thanked Huang and left for Donglin County. The circuit became a rhythm. Arrive, assess, adapt, implement, document, move on. Each county was different. Donglin had ethnic minority villages where coordination required navigating complex cultural protocols. Shikiao had mountain terrain that made physical coordination challenging, but created opportunities for vertical integration. Valley villages growing rice, mountain villages managing forests, trading across elevation zones. Everywhere, Chenwei learned, not just about coordination, but about the infinite variations of rural life. About how systems that looked identical on paper functioned completely differently in practice. About the gap between theory and reality, and how that gap was where actual governance happened. He also learned about his own limitations. In Huaping County, he pushed too hard, too fast. Tried to implement coordination before building sufficient trust. The result was a backlash. 3 party secretaries formally complained to the prefecture that Chenwei was undermining their authority. Deputy Director Wang had to intervene, soothe egos, pull back the implementation timeline. "You're good at this work," Wang told him over a crackly phone connection, "but you're still learning when to push and when to wait. Some things can't be rushed." "I know, there's so much to do and so little time." There's always more to do than time allows. Or that's governance. You prioritize, you choose, you accept that some things won't get done. That's not failure, that's reality. Chenwei absorbed the lesson, slowed down, spent more time listening, less time proposing. Let party secretaries come to their own conclusions rather than dragging them to his. The work improved. By August, he was in his 5th county, Yangming, the largest of the pilot counties, with 60 villages and 30,000 people. This was the real test. If coordination could work at this scale, it could work anywhere. Secretary Li was perhaps the most sophisticated administrator Chenwei had worked with. Educated, experienced, politically astute. She'd been watching the pilot program's progress and had her own ideas about implementation. "Your small county model won't work here," she said at their first meeting. "Whoa, too many villages, too much complexity. But I think we can adapt the principles if we use intermediate coordinating bodies." Chenwei's respect for Li grew as they worked together. She understood the system's logic better than he did in some ways, saw implications he'd missed, pushed him to think more systematically about scale. Together, they designed a 3-tier coordination structure. Village-level coordination for 3, 5 villages with natural relationships. District-level coordination grouping multiple village clusters, county-level coordination managing strategic resources. It was more complex than anything Chenwei had attempted, more ambitious, more likely to fail catastrophically. It was also brilliant. They spent 2 months implementing, training district coordinators, building communication protocols, designing dispute resolution mechanisms that could handle conflicts at different scales. And slowly, improbably, it started working. Not perfectly. There were conflicts, failures, villages that opted out. But the overall trend was positive. Production increased, resource allocation improved. Villages that had operated in isolation for decades started talking to each other. In October, Deputy Director Wang visited Yangming to observe. "This is impressive," she said, watching a district-level coordination meeting where 10 party secretaries were negotiating autumn harvest labor allocation. "Different from what you did in Chingshan, but the principles are the same." "Secretary Li deserves most of the credit," Chenwei said. "She understood scale challenges I didn't, and you had the humility to learn from her." "Wait, that's why this is working." Wang made notes in her ever-present notebook. "The Prefecture Planning Committee meets in December to review the pilot program. I'll be recommending full implementation based on what I've seen. Even with the failures, especially with the failures, you've documented what doesn't work as carefully as what does. That's more valuable than fake success." The circuit ended in November. Chenwei returned to Chingshan County exhausted, older than his 25 years should have made him, and with a notebook full of lessons learned. Secretary Wu met him at the bus station personally, an unusual honor. "Welcome back," Wu said. "You look like hell." "I feel like hell. How's Chingshan?" "Surviving. Zhao kept the coordination system running, but it needs your attention. Some villages are slipping back into isolation." "I'll fix it." "I know you will, but first, there's something you should know. Yangmei is in town." Chenwei stopped walking. "What?" "She showed up 3 days ago. Claimed she was doing ministry field research. Wants to see you?" I told her you were away, but she's staying at the county guest house waiting. Of course she was. Young Mei didn't give up easily. I'll handle it, Chen Wei said. See that you do. I don't need romantic drama disrupting county operations. Chen Wei dropped his bag at his quarters. Lin was out, fortunately, and walked to the guest house. The building was small, simple, the kind of place that hosted traveling officials and salesmen. Young Mei was in the courtyard reading. She looked up when he approached, and her face transformed. Joy, relief, says something that might have been love. Wega! She stood, moved toward him. You're back? I've been waiting. Why are you here, Mei Mei? She stopped, something in his tone. I wanted to see you. It's been almost a year. Your letters were so brief, I thought. You thought you could convince me to accept the transfer you arranged. A pause. How did you know about that? Prefecture Secretary Chen told me, and told the ministry I wasn't available for reassignment. But Wei Ji, this is your chance. Position in the Agricultural Ministry Planning Office, Beijing. We could be together again. Chen Wei looked at her. Really looked. She was still beautiful, still ambitious, still the kind of person who turned heads and commanded attention, and she was offering him everything his old self had wanted. Oh, I don't want to go back to Beijing, he said. You can't mean that. This county, this work, it's beneath you. You're wasting your talent on village coordination systems when you could be shaping national policy. I'm not wasting anything. I'm building something that matters. Building what? A career in rural obscurity? Building systems that help people. Building knowledge about how governance actually works instead of how it looks on paper. Building a life that's mine instead of someone else's plan for me. Young Mei's expression hardened. I see. You've convinced yourself that this exile is actually a choice. It is a choice, and it's the right one for me. Because you're too proud to accept my help? Because I don't need your help. Chen Wei said it gently but firmly. Mei Mei, you're brilliant. You'll do amazing things in Beijing, but you'll do them without me? I'm not your project to rescue. I'm not waiting for you anymore. You never loved me, did you? Her voice was bitter. You just loved the idea of being connected to my uncle's influence. I loved you, Chen Wei said honestly, but I loved the wrong version of us. The version where I made myself smaller so you could be larger. That's not love. That's just diminishment. So this is it? We're really over? We've been over for almost a year. You just didn't want to admit it. Young Mei stood very still. Then she nodded once, a sharp, definitive gesture. Fine, stay in your village, coordinate your resources, build your little systems, see if I care. She gathered her things. I'll be gone tomorrow. And Chen Wei, don't contact me again. I don't need reminders of what I wasted my time on. She swept out, all injured dignity and controlled anger. Chen Wei stood in the courtyard as twilight fell, felt the weight of the old timeline lifting, the version where he'd spent decades regretting losing her, wondering what might have been if he'd tried harder, waited longer, been more patient. This version was better. Painful, yes, but honest. He walked back to his quarters. Lin was there now, reading by lamplight. I saw Young Mei leaving the guest house, Lin said. She looked furious. She was. Are you all right? I am, actually. Chen Wei sat at his desk, pulled out his circuit notebooks. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And where is that? Right here, doing this work. Building something that might outlast me, Lin smiled. You really have changed. No, Chen Wei said. Thinking of his previous life, of the old man dying alone with nothing to show for his years. I've just finally become who I was supposed to be all along. He opened the notebooks and started writing his report for the Prefecture Planning Committee. Outside, Chingshan County settled into night. The same sounds he'd heard for almost a year now, wind in the trees, distant voices, the eternal rhythm of rural life. The same, but also transformed by the work of building something new from old foundations. Chen Wei smiled and kept writing. The real work was just beginning. December brought snow to Chingshan County and a summons to the prefecture capital. Prefecture Secretary Chen wanted a full briefing on the pilot program before the planning committee meeting. Not from Deputy Director Wang, from Chen Wei directly. 2 hours, private meeting, no staff allowed. That's either very good or very bad, Secretary Wu said, helping Chen Wei prepare his presentation materials. Hard to tell which. Both, Chen Wei said. Political attention is always both. The trip to the prefecture capital took a full day by bus, winding through mountain roads turned treacherous by ice. Chen Wei used the time to review his notes, rehearse his presentation, and fight down the anxiety that kept threatening to overwhelm him. 1 year ago, he'd been standing on a train platform in Beijing, his whole life ahead of him, making the choice between waiting for someone else's rescue or building his own future. Now he was about to present the results of that choice to someone who could determine the trajectory of the next phase of his life. No pressure. Prefecture Secretary Chen's office was surprisingly modest. Simple desk, basic furniture, walls covered with maps and production charts, rather than the mandatory political slogans. The man himself was reading when Chen Wei was shown in, and didn't look up immediately. "Sit," Chen said, still focused on his documents. "I'm finishing your circuit reports. They're remarkably honest. Most administrators would have hidden the failures. The failures are where the learning happens." Chen set down the reports. Finally looked at Chen Wei. "Tell me something. Why do you think the pilot program worked?" Chen Wei had prepared an answer to this question. Comparative advantage, systematic coordination, improved resource allocation, all the technical justifications. He abandoned the prepared answer. "Because I stopped trying to prove I was smart and started trying to actually solve problems." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Elaborate?" "In university, in Beijing, even in my first months here, I wanted people to be impressed by how much I knew. So I'd propose elegant theoretical solutions that looked good on paper but crashed when they hit reality. The pilot program worked because I finally accepted that being right is less important than getting results." "And what results have you gotten?" Chen Wei pulled out his summary data. 5 counties, 9 months of implementation, thousands of data points condensed into clear metrics. Production increases 15 to 35% depending on county and sector. Resource allocation efficiency improved in 4 counties, marginal in 1. Intervillage cooperation, measurable increase in all counties. Administrative overhead, higher than traditional systems, but offset by productivity gains. Political stability, improved, fewer complaints about resource shortages, more trust in county administration. But more than the numbers, Chen Wei showed the human dimension. Letters from farmers about how coordination had helped them, reports from party secretaries about reduced conflicts, testimonials from villagers about feeling less isolated. "This is what we actually achieved," Chen Wei said. "Not a revolution, just incremental improvement in how people work together." Chen studied the materials in silence. Then, "The planning committee meets in 3 days. They'll review this pilot and decide whether to expand it prefecture-wide. Wang will present the data. You'll present the implementation lessons. There will be opposition." "I expected that." "Did you expect the opposition to come from Prefecture Vice Secretary Liu?" Chen Wei's stomach tightened. Vice Secretary Liu was the second most powerful person in the prefecture, responsible for political discipline and ideological correctness. What's his concern? That your system encourages villages to prioritize efficiency over political loyalty, that it creates resource inequalities by allowing successful villages to pull ahead, that it's fundamentally counter to collective principles. Chen paused. "He's not entirely wrong." "No, he's not." Chen Wei met Chen's eyes. "The coordination system does create inequalities. Villages that participate succeed. Villages that don't fall behind. But that's choice. Say, not exploitation." Liu would argue that choice without equal capacity is just another name for inequality. And I'd argue that pretending everyone has equal capacity doesn't make it true, it just makes the problems invisible. "You'd say that to his face, in front of the planning committee?" "If he asks me directly, yes." Chen leaned back. "You're either very brave or very foolish." Deputy Director Wang says both. A flicker of amusement. "She's right." Chen stood, walked to the window overlooking the prefecture courtyard. "I'm going to tell you something that doesn't leave this office. The pilot program's success has created political complications. There are people in the provincial capital who've heard about it. Good people and dangerous people. If we expand it prefecture-wide, you'll become visible at the provincial level. That visibility can advance your career or destroy it. What do you recommend?" "I recommend you decide what you want. If you want a safe, quiet career in rural administration, we can find you a comfortable position where you'll do good work and never attract attention. If you want to matter, to build systems that might reshape how we think about governance, then you accept the visibility and the risk that comes with it." Chen Wei thought about his previous life, about the safe choices, the comfortable obscurity, the slow fade into irrelevance. I want to matter, he said. Then prepare for the planning committee to be brutal. Liu will attack your ideas. Others will pile on. You'll need to defend every choice, every failure, every decision, and if you stumble, if you show weakness, they'll use it to bury the whole program. I won't stumble. Don't make promises you can't keep. Chen returned to his desk. But do prepare as thoroughly as you can. Wang will coach you on the political dimensions. I suggest you listen to her. The next 3 days were intensive preparation. Deputy Director Wang put Chen Wei through mock presentations, playing the role of hostile questioners. She was ruthless, attacking every weak point, exploiting every ambiguity, forcing him to defend positions he hadn't fully thought through. Again, she'd say whenever he fumbled an answer. Liu won't give you time to think. You need instant, clear responses. By the third day, Chen Wei could field her attacks automatically. His answers were sharp, precise, stripped of unnecessary complexity. Good, Wang said after their final practice session. Or you're ready. Remember, you're not trying to convince Liu. He's already decided to oppose you. You're convincing the uncommitted middle. Talk to them, not to him. The planning committee met in a large hall, tiered seating for 30 officials, with Prefecture Secretary Chen at the center and Vice Secretary Liu to his right. Chen Wei sat at a small table facing them, feeling very young and very exposed. Deputy Director Wang presented first. Clean data, clear analysis, professional delivery. The committee listened politely, asked technical questions, nodded at appropriate points. Then it was Chen Wei's turn. He'd prepared a presentation about implementation lessons, about what worked and what didn't, about how to scale coordination systems across different county types. He got 3 sentences in before Vice Secretary Liu interrupted. Comrade Chen Wei, let me ask you a fundamental question. Does your coordination system serve the people, or does it serve efficiency? Chen Wei paused. This was the trap. Answer, efficiency, and he'd be accused of prioritizing production over people. Answer, the people, and he'd be accused of empty sloganeering. The question assumes they're different, Chen Wei said. I don't think they are. Serving the people means helping them be more productive, which requires efficiency. Efficiency without serving the people is exploitation. They're 2 sides of the same goal. That's a convenient formulation, but it dodges the real question. When there's a conflict between efficiency and equality, which does your system prioritize? The system prioritizes choice. Villages that want to coordinate can pursue efficiency. High villages that want to maintain independence can pursue equality within their boundaries. Both are legitimate priorities. And you don't see a problem with creating a 2-tier system where some villages succeed and others struggle? I see a problem with pretending that equality exists when it doesn't. Some villages have better land, better leadership, better geographic positions. We can force them to hide those advantages through administrative commandism. Or we can create systems that let them use those advantages to benefit others through coordination. The first approach creates fake equality. The second creates real improvement. The room was very quiet. Liu leaned forward. That sounds dangerously like arguing for inequality as a natural state. I'm arguing that pretending everyone starts from the same position doesn't make it true. And systems based on false assumptions fail. Better to acknowledge reality and design systems that work with it. Even if that reality involves some people being left behind. No one is being left behind. Villages that struggle can request help through the coordination system. Resources flow to where they're needed. What I'm against is forcing resources to flow to places that refuse to participate in collective planning. So you'd let villages that resist your system suffer? I'd let them experience the consequences of their choices. That's different from making them suffer. Liu's expression was cold. You have a very individualistic interpretation of collective responsibility. This was the moment, the accusation that could end everything. Chen Wei could back down, soften his position, claim he'd been misunderstood. Instead, he met Liu's eyes directly. With respect, Vice Secretary, I have a very realistic interpretation of collective responsibility. True collective action requires genuine buy-in, not forced compliance. My system builds that buy-in by showing villages that cooperation benefits them. Your approach, mandating cooperation whether people want it or not, creates resentment and sabotage. I've seen it in every county I visited, forced collectivization that looks good in reports, but produces nothing in reality. Are you suggesting that our current administrative approach is a failure? I'm suggesting that some aspects of it could be improved, and that the pilot program demonstrates one possible improvement. A tense silence. Then, Prefecture Secretary Chen spoke. Vice Secretary Liu, do you have specific concerns about the pilot program's methodology that we should address? Liu looked like he wanted to continue the attack, but direct defiance of the Prefecture Secretary would be politically dangerous. I have concerns about the ideological framework, Liu said finally. But I acknowledge that the production results are impressive. I'd like to see more detailed analysis of the political implications before we make a decision about expansion. Reasonable, Chen said. Comrade Chen Wei, can you provide a supplementary report addressing ideological dimensions within 2 weeks? Yes, Prefecture Secretary. The meeting continued. Other committee members asked questions, most technical, a few political. Chen Wei answered carefully, consistently, letting the data speak wherever possible. Finally, after 3 hours, Chen called for a vote. The question before the committee: should we expand the coordination pilot program prefecture-wide with modifications based on lessons learned? A show of hands. Chen Wei tried not to watch too obviously. The result: 18 in favor, 7 opposed, 5 abstaining. The motion carries, Chen said. Deputy Director Wang will coordinate implementation. Comrade Chen Wei will serve as Chief Technical Advisor while maintaining his position in Chingshan County. Details to be finalized within 1 month. The meeting adjourned. Chen Wei sat very still, processing what had just happened. They'd done it. The pilot program was becoming official policy. Deputy Director Wang appeared beside him. Congratulations. You just changed prefecture administration. I just survived Vice Secretary Liu trying to destroy me. Same thing. And you did well. Better than I expected, actually. That line about forced cooperation creating resentment, that was sharp. It was also probably career suicide. Maybe Liu will respect you for standing up to him. He values strength, even in opponents. Fao Huang gathered her materials. Either way, you're committed now. Province-level visibility by spring, full expansion across the prefecture by summer. No more quiet rural administrator career for you. Chen Wei thought about Secretary W's offer from months ago. A comfortable position, good work, no attention. He'd chosen differently. I'm okay with that, he said. Good, because there's no going back now. Chen Wei returned to Chingshan County 2 days later. They exhausted but energized. Secretary Wu met him at the office with a bottle of baijiu and 2 cups. I heard, Wu said, pouring, prefecture-wide expansion, chief technical advisor, provincial visibility. He raised his cup. To the boy from Beijing, who became more countryside than any of us. They drank. Wu Shu, Chen Wei said, using the familiar address for the first time. Can I ask you something? After that political knife fight you just survived, you can ask me anything. When I first arrived, you didn't think I'd last a month. What changed your mind? You refilled both cups. Thought about his answer. You stopped trying to be impressive and started trying to be useful. That's rare. Most Beijing intellectuals spend their whole careers trying to prove they're smarter than everyone else. You figured out that being smart doesn't matter if you can't make things better. Is that a compliment? From me? Yes. Wu raised his cup again. To making things better. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They drank into the night, talking about next steps, expansion plans, the challenges ahead. And when Chen Wei finally walked back to his quarters through the winter dark, he felt something he hadn't felt in either lifetime, certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do. The snow fell softly on Chingshan County. In the distance, mountains rose against the star-filled sky, eternal and indifferent. But in the valleys, in the villages, in the careful work of building systems that helped people thrive, there, human effort mattered. There, change was possible. Chen Wei smiled and kept walking. The work was far from finished, but it was working, and that was enough. Epilogue, 20 years later. The mayor's office in Chingshan County occupied the top floor of a new administrative building, completed 5 years ago with provincial development funds. Chen Wei sat at his desk, larger than the one he'd had as a junior administrator, but still simple, reviewing budget proposals for next year's infrastructure projects. 20 years. Hard to believe. The coordination system had expanded across the prefecture within 2 years of the planning committee vote, across the province within 5. Now it was being studied by other provinces, adapted and modified, succeeding in some places and failing in others. Chen Wei had risen with it. From chief technical advisor to deputy director of prefecture planning, then director, then back to Chingshan County as party secretary when Secretary Wu retired, then mayor when the county was upgraded due to population growth and economic development. 20 years of building, adjusting, learning, improving. The door opened. Deputy Mayor Zhao, no relation to the old deputy secretary, poked his head in. "Mayor Chen, there's a visitor from Beijing. Says she knows you." "Yang Mei." Chen Wei's hand paused mid-signature. He hadn't heard that name in... how long? 15 years? "Show her in?" Yang Mei had aged well. 52 now, hair carefully styled, wearing an expensive suit that screamed Beijing success. She entered the office with the confidence of someone used to commanding rooms. "Chen Wei," she said. "Or should I say Mayor Chen?" "Chen Wei is fine, we're old friends." "Are we?" She sat without being invited. "I wasn't sure you'd see me. Why wouldn't I? Because I treated you badly, all those years ago. I've thought about it often." She looked around the office, taking in the modest furnishings, the maps on the walls, the photographs of village development projects. "This is really what you chose? County mayor in the middle of nowhere?" "Chingshan isn't nowhere. It's home." "You could have come back to Beijing. I tried to arrange it." "I know. I chose to stay." Yang Mei nodded slowly. "I'm here on ministry business. We're studying your coordination system, thinking about national implementation." She pulled out a folder. "I'm supposed to interview you about lessons learned." "Ask your questions." They spent 2 hours talking. Chen Wei described the system's evolution, the modifications made over 2 decades, the failures and successes. So Yang Mei took notes, asked sharp questions, occasionally smiled at his more pointed observations about bureaucratic resistance. Finally, she set down her pen. "Can I ask you something off the record?" "Go ahead. Do you regret it? Staying here? You could have had a ministry position, national influence, maybe even provincial leadership by now." Chen Wei thought about the question, about his previous life, where he died having built nothing, changed nothing, mattered to no one. "No," he said, "I don't regret it. This work, building systems that help people, watching villages transform, seeing the next generation of administrators learn and improve, this matters to me. Maybe I could have had more influence in Beijing, but I'm not sure I would have done more good." "You always were idealistic." "I'm practical." "Why, idealism is believing in perfect solutions. I just believe in solving actual problems." Yang Mei stood. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how I treated you back then. You deserved better. We both made choices. I'm happy with mine." "Are you?" She looked at him closely. "Really?" "Yes. Are you happy with yours?" A pause. "I'm successful? That's not quite the same thing, is it?" "No, but it's not nothing either." She smiled, genuine this time. "You've gotten wise in your old age." "I've just had time to learn from my mistakes." After she left, Chen Wei stood at the window, looking out over Chingshan County. The view had changed dramatically over 20 years. New buildings, paved roads, evidence of prosperity that would have seemed impossible that first winter. But the mountains were still there. The fields still grew rice. People still worked, struggled, built lives in the space between ambition and circumstance. His phone rang. Deputy Mayor Zhao. "Mayor, 4th Village is requesting emergency funds for flood damage. The same area that floods every year. Should I approve?" Chen Wei smiled. "Same problems, different decade. The work was never finished. Tell them we'll approve funds if they implement the flood prevention measures we proposed last year. Help them coordinate with 3rd and 5th villages on shared infrastructure. Make it collective or make it their problem." "Understood, Mayor." Chen Wei hung up, sat back down at his desk, returned to the budget proposals. In Beijing, Yang Mei was probably filing her report, moving on to her next assignment, her important work at the ministry. In Chingshan, Chen Wei was solving one small problem at a time. Building systems that might outlast him, helping people who would never know his name. And he wouldn't trade positions with her for anything. The work was far from perfect, but it was real, and real was enough.